When I was first starting out in electronics, one of the hardest things for me to get my head wrapped around was the whole Ohm's Law. With Ohm's Law, you have your amps, your resistance, and your volts. If you know any two of them, you can figure out the third. Ohm's Law is usually, most commonly, depicted as a triangle. Cut it into three parts. On your top, it's usually depicted in E, which is your volts. On the bottom left, it's I, which is amps, and on the bottom right is R, which is resistance. If you know any two of these, you can figure out the third one. Let's start out figuring out volts. Let's say you're trying to design some kind of a circuit and you're not too sure what kind of volts it can handle, but you know what the resistance is of the circuit and you know how many amps you want to run through the circuit. So to figure that out, you take your amps and you multiply them by the resistance. So for example, if I have a circuit that is pulling 2 amps with a resistance of 5 ohms. All you have to do is multiply them, 2 times 5, and you're running at 10 volts through that circuit. Now if you want to figure out your amps, all you have to do is take the volts and divide them by the resistance. So let's say in the same scenario, the same circuit, let's say we have 10 volts, we have a resistance of 5 ohms, and if we divide that, we know the circuit can handle 2 amps. Now to figure out the resistance, it's just the opposite of this. So to figure out your resistance, you have your volts, and you divide that by the amps. So going back to this here, we have a circuit with 10 volts divided by 2 amps. So then we know that our resistance on that circuit is 5 ohms. Simple enough. So in this diagram, we had 10 volts, 2 amps, and 5 ohms of resistance. Now one other thing, the whole volts and amps. I was actually earlier trying to teach this to my son, and the best analogy to figuring out what volts, amps, and resistance is say I was telling him to take a water hose. You turn that water on, full blast, and that water hose is running at, we're going to say 20 psi. And at that, we are getting 5 gallons per minute of water out of that water hose. Now that's full voltage, full amps. So in the case of this, our pressure in the water hose, our water pressure, is equal to the volts in a circuit. Our gallons per minute, well, that's equal to the amps in a circuit. And then our resistance, if you took that water hose and you started kinking it, well, the pressure is the same, but you end up cutting down how much volume you get out of it, or your amps. So if you kink that hose about halfway, you'll only be getting 2.5 gallons per minute then out of that hose. You have the same pressure, same psi, and this, you'll just be running less water volume. So anyway, I was trying to explain that to my son. So the kink is the resistance, the water pressure is the voltage, and the gallons per minute you were getting out of the water hose was the amps. He kind of understood it. But anyways, I hope this makes a little bit of sense. All you know is Ohm's Law, the easy little triangle. I was able to shed some light on the whole volts and amps and resistance in a circuit. So, having questions, comment below, or just any suggestions at all for anything, comment down below and let me know. So, as always, get out there and go make it.